We're mushing the NBA draft. Bum, bum. Good jingle. You need a jingle. Everybody needs one. Third installment of Mushing the NBA Draft. This might be the last one before we jump into odds and stuff like that and making picks once all the bets come out for props and stuff like that. Wings are the name of the game today. Put some hot sauce on them. They're delicious. In the NBA, I mean, hot sauce, great. I'm trying to think of his name. Great and one mixtape player. I keep thinking of Rafer Alston, but that was skipped to my loo. The point is, wings are really important in today's NBA. You look at the NBA Finals, how many wing players and defenders and 3-and-D guys can you throw out there that are super impactful to the game? I mean, I keep thinking about the Suns, actually, because they have Crowder and Bridges and all these different guys that they can throw out there that makes them so versatile and hard to deal with defensively. You could say the same about the Warriors and the Celtics, really. Warriors have the Wiggins, obviously, but then you have Porter, you have Iguodala, you have Kuminga, you even have Gary Payton who can defend wings. You have Draymond a little bit that can get out there on the perimeter. You have Klay Thompson, who's a guard but can defend wings. All these guys are interchangeable in certain ways. The Celtics, too. They have Brown, Tatum, Grant Williams. I mean, they're not as deep, but Horford can play on the perimeter a little bit. Even when your big guys can be wings, it's important. So I think these are the most pivotal players in the draft, and I think they're the most pivotal players in the NBA. And while I do believe that guards can have the higher ceiling, maybe that's not necessarily true, but you need them to fill it up a lot more. There's a lot of really good guards that are handling the ball a lot, and in order to put them in the best possible situation on an NBA court, you need multiple versatile wings. That is the name of the game in 2022, and I think you have some of them in this draft, and I think the way the draft is going to happen is going to change. At the top of the draft, we did the top 3 video. Go back to that if you haven't subscribed, like, all the things, blah, blah, blah. That's where you need to hit home runs. But when you're drafting wings, you can, of course, have a wing that can hit a home run with. Jabari, I would call a wing, and Paolo, definitely, I would call a wing. But these level players, I have 5. And I think they are more, I don't want to call them role players because they all have different upsides. But you want these guys to be able to come in and contribute in a real playoff scenario right away. Whether the teams are ready for that or not is not really the point. I'm looking at this as, can I plug this guy into a team that is really good, and I think he can serve a role on both ends of the court, or at least have a really high upside on one of the ends. And I think some of that is true more than others, and then I think some of these other players have really high upsides but lower floors. So today we're going to go through Keegan Murray, Iowa, Jeremy Sochan, Baylor, Shaedon Sharpe from Kentucky, didn't play in college, that's going to be a tough one, AJ Griffin at Duke, and Osumane Dieng from New Zealand. First foreign player that we're going at here. And then I had some honorable mentions that we'll get to at the end. By the way, I don't think we're going to do a whole video on bigs. We already talked about Chet Holmgren in the top 3 video, and there aren't a lot of bigs that I think could go in the top 10 or the top half of this first round. And there's a few that I'll call out quickly. Jalen Duren is fine if you need an athletic shot blocker mid-draft a la Robert Williams or DeAndre Jordan kind of guy. Mark Williams, great interior, but is a bit of a dinosaur in today's NBA, probably. Could serve a role, but limited upside unless he develops a three-point shot, which I feel like would be weird, and can defend the perimeter. I don't know. That Duke team was loaded, so maybe he has more to offer than he showed, but some concerns about drafting him high because of upside. Christian Koloko from Arizona, similar to Duren, with more finishing ability, so maybe like a Clint Capella type. And then Walker Kessler isn't as athletic as any of these others and can't shoot at all, but he's a huge body, so like a bizarro Enes Kanter who can play defense but not offense. And that's pretty much it when it comes to bigs. So in this world where wings are playing small ball 5 and definitely small ball 4, which is the only thing that exists now, it just didn't feel necessary to do a different video. So there you go. If you're into centers, that's your breakdown. I don't know what else to tell you. But let's get into these specific wing players, starting from the top of who I like best and then moving our way down. And first, I have Keegan Murray. I'm really just intrigued by his skill set. Now, there's a very clear downside. The first people will point out his age. He's 21. He's about to turn 22 before he steps on an NBA court. That's never generally what you want because And I don't know how much I believe in this, but a lot of people do. The upside is capped when you're 22 compared to 19 coming into the NBA, because those years of development are pretty key. The difference with Murray, whereas a Buddy Hield and those kind of guys played 4 or 5 years in college and you knew that this is pretty much who they are, Keegan Murray only played 2 years at Iowa, and we saw crazy improvement from the first year to the second year. Played at a JUCO before that, was a really late bloomer, didn't grow into his body until late, didn't develop a jumper until late. So I think the development has kind of already happened. And if you saw him, I mean, this is a weird example because he wouldn't have gone into the draft early. But there are some project players that we went over in the guards video and some later in this video probably that I think will be where Keegan Murray was last year as a younger player or even the year before. And you're hoping that they'll make the leaps that Keegan Murray has already kind of made. So I think while his upside is a little bit capped, I do think he's coming into the league with the skill set that you need him to have to serve a role pretty much immediately. So while age could be looked at as a weakness, if you're drafting him for the right spot, I think it can be a strength. For example, again, we don't want to do mock draft kind of stuff because who knows where these players are going to go. But if you looked at the 5th pick to Detroit, or even the 4th pick, I don't think the Kings are going to go with Keegan Murray, but maybe they did. And if you did, you could see him slotting in between Fox and Sabonis and serving a really nice role there. Now, I don't think Keegan Murray and Sabonis as a front court is going to work because neither of them are going to defend ultra well inside the paint. I think that might be a disaster. But the point remains, maybe Detroit is a better example. You put him with Cade, you already have the star power. You can probably get rid of Jeremy Grant. And then you have him next to Sadiq Bey, and it kind of makes some sense. You just need those role players. And not to say that Keegan Murray doesn't have upside. He does. But you're getting a more finished product, which some people view as good, some people view as bad. So I don't know if he's going to be like MVP upside, but I think the floor is a lot higher with him than it is with some other players. And I think for certain teams, that's probably pretty attractive. So weaknesses, we said age. Leaping ability and athleticism is not all the way there for a guy that's, 6'8", 215-ish, according to Sports Reference anyway. I don't think that he's going to improve in that area either. So if you're expecting him to be a leaping, finishing dunker or a rim protector, that's not really what you're getting him for. You want some 3-and-D ability. You want IQ, hustle. Shooting has gotten to be a real strength for him. And lack of mistakes. It's like these are his strengths and they don't sound as cool as some other strengths, but honestly, you're getting a guy that projects to me as an NBA veteran when he steps on the floor, which is maybe saying too much. I'm sure rookies will make mistakes, but it's rare. It's rare that you can get a guy that's this polished, in my opinion, that's ready to serve a role and knows how to serve a role. That's a really important thing that I think some of these guys don't have. A lot of players grow up being the man, and their AAU teams look to them to do all the things, and then in college they step in, they're expecting to do it. Some of them struggle to adjust to that role. Like, I don't know if I have a perfect example. I guess one was like, this is a really random one, but when Jordan Crawford came into the NBA, in college and in high school, he was always, go get us buckets, go get us buckets, go get us buckets, and he was able to do it. And then he comes into the NBA. I think he had a cup of coffee with the Celtics. He was around for a little while. And then when he's not expected to be the primary scorer, it's like, well, what can you do for us? Are there skills that you can bring to the table? And a lot of players struggle with that, and I think Keegan Murray had all that to begin with, going from the junior college route, finding his way as a role player, even at Iowa, 18 minutes per game, not this past season, but the one before that. And then this past season, you saw them say, okay, we need you to score now, bumped it up to 23.5 points per game, 9 rebounds, can do a whole lot of things, can keep the ball moving, can defend in multiple ways, versatile. So I think it's kind of an advantage to not have always been the man. Whereas that could cap your upside, and if you're drafting top 5 in the NBA draft, you kind of do want to get a player that you think could maybe win an MVP one day. Maybe that's not what you're going for with Keegan Murray, but he can improve your team immediately and serve a role on a real playoff run. So I like Murray a lot. You just have to know what you're getting into here. My player comparisons for him are kind of hard, but I came up with 4 that I kind of like. I mentioned Otto Porter before. I think the way his career has gone has been weird. When he came into the league, Otto Porter's stats were better than they are now, and I don't think he's become a worse player. I think he's just playing a different role, which to my point, like, you want a guy that can come in for the Warriors and play this role. Look, at his peak, he was a 15-point per game scorer, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, fill up some steals and blocks, play solid perimeter defense. And you were like, okay, this can project upward. And now you look this year, and he's 8 points per game, 6 rebounds, still defending at a high level, and still shooting pretty much the same, except the usage rate is just through the floor. But you know what? Some guys can't step back and serve this role on a Warriors team that might win the NBA championship. If you're watching this later, maybe they already have or haven't or whatever. But it's attractive to me to have an Otto Porter type. Because if you need him to, if someone gets hurt, he can step into the starting role. He can even fill up some shots and probably still score 15 points per game if he needs to, but doesn't need all the shots, doesn't need all the glory, is fully willing and prepared to serve that role that you need him to serve in any capacity. So I think it's a compliment to call him Otto Porter for sure. Some other ones I came up with, Al Horford, maybe not as much of a banger on the interior, but if you could have a semi-perimeter version of Al Horford, I think that's what Keegan Murray is projecting to be. All the intangibles that you like from Horford. Kyle Kuzma, Tobias Harris, just very versatile offensive and defensive characters that I think, again, depending on the team, my next player has a little bit of a higher upside. So if you're going for upside, I'd go with him. And if you're going for immediate impact, I'd go with Murray. But that brings us to our second one, which is Jeremy Sochan. From Baylor, who I'm really intrigued by, but this is a total difference from Keegan Murray. Sochan is going to defend like crazy. And while Keegan Murray has improved his jump shot to a wild degree, used to be somewhat of a weakness, now is a strength, and I think can be a 3-and-D guy, you're not going to get the 3 from Sochan. The weaknesses are pretty glaring. Offense, shooting. He's not going to be an offensive player. Not right now. But could develop. Only 19. Just turned 19. So there's room to improve here. But again, while there is upside because there's improvement capabilities on the offensive end, you're getting a guy that I think can come in and serve a role immediately, at least defensively. Defense is just a huge strength for him, both versatility, upside, on ball, off ball. Not awful scoring on the inside, but that's not what you're going to go to him for. But although, can finish around the rim, I guess. His handle's not that bad. You could see him becoming like a pick and roll option, kinda. And mom and dad played college basketball at Oklahoma, so he's got the body for it and the genes. And you could see it in the way that he moves, but the point here is he's 6'9", 230 pounds, can defend probably every position on the floor. So you're looking at a guy that projects similarly to how I projected Mikal Bridges, who is now a really good player, and I really have enjoyed the way he's improved offensively. And I think he's a step above Sochan offensively because he does have skills in that department. But defensively, the length, the versatility, the effort, the hustle, all of that projects pretty nice. Similar to like an Aaron Gordon without some of the athleticism, but still has enough for sure. Maybe like a Ben Simmons post missed layup, which we haven't seen a lot of, but projecting as a little bit less offensively than Simmons was doing in a run-the-show point guard kind of way, but still giving all of that defensive player of the year upside for being able to guard every single player. If you have a defense that switches everything, Sochan is going to make it perfect for you. Can play some small ball 5 probably if the opponent isn't going with an offensive big that's going to crush you. He can do a lot of different things. Can probably play the 3 if you need him to, but it's going to kill your spacing on offense. More of a 4 generally that can move to the 5 when you're going small, but can defend guards if you need him to, which is a really important thing in today's NBA. You got to switch onto those guards, and you have to survive. And the teams that can't do that, you see him get bounced. I could see Sochan being like a current Draymond, without all the offensive skills, but still some ability to handle the ball, do the dribble handoff kind of thing. Not going to shoot, but still impacts offensively somehow, despite offensive rating not being very high, and can switch everything, defend at a really high level, bring a lot of energy to the table, which is really good. He's kind of like Herb Jones from last year, who I think served a really good role for the Pelicans and has some upside himself. And then worst case, I think at worst, you're getting a forward. I mean, he is a forward. You're getting like a taller version of PJ Tucker, who maybe eventually develop a corner three and you can at least keep defenses honest. But the truth is, Tucker with 0 points, 0 assists is still worth having on the floor most of the time. And Milwaukee kind of missed him this year, especially when Middleton went out. If they would have re-signed him, I think they would have went further. Maybe we'd be talking differently about the finals. But in any case, I think Sochan is just a really special defensive talent. And while I don't generally love early in the draft going with guys that I don't think have offensive upside, like Keegan Murray, if you're expecting him to come in and fill a role that makes sense for your team, then maybe it's going to be okay. Again, I don't think he'll go this high, but if you looked at the Pistons, for example, or even the Kings, I mean, at 4, that won't happen unless something wild happens before the draft and draft stock goes bananas. But you could see how next to Sabonis, that makes some sense to fill to balance. He's the yin to Sabonis's yang. One can handle all the offense, one can handle all the defense, and they can switch with each other on screens and stuff like that as necessary. And Sochan can kind of at least hopefully protect the rim against non-7-footers that are monsters. So I really like what you're getting from him. You know what you're getting, and yet I think there's room to grow offensively like Bridges did. So I'm intrigued by him. I think I have Keegan Murray and Sochan in similar tiers, and I just think there's better fits for certain teams and certain coaching staffs that want each individual type of player. But I don't know if one will be totally better than the other. I think they'll project differently, but both can serve roles quickly. And that is important to some people, myself included. So I'm definitely intrigued by Sochan, and I think he's a little too low on a lot of people's boards. Next, I am going to Shaedon Sharpe. Now, I'm not going to go too deep on this one. I have thoughts. I watched some of the high school tape, but listen, he didn't play at Kentucky. He was supposed to. He was a number 1 overall prospect that signed with Kentucky. First one since Nerlens Noel, as you see here. I'd bring up his stats, but they're buried in here somewhere. Yeah, averaged 24 points, 6 rebounds per game as a junior in high school. But high school stats, I mean, what are we doing here, right? So it's hard to know because we didn't see him. The weakness, I guess, by default for Sharpe is experience. From what I'm viewing, kind of awareness and off the ball intensity. But again, in high school, when you're the man, I don't know that you're worried about that kind of stuff. So I don't even know if it's a weakness. It's just what portrayed on the film to me. And then shot selection, he shot a lot of volume even when he was streaking downward. But that's high school, and when you're expected to be the guy, then it kind of makes sense, right? That you're going to get the ball and do a lot of things against teams that are just inferior to your skill level. The strengths, though, are really through the roof, and kind of gives you, from what it seems, everything that you want. Now, again, we're not seeing him against great competition, so are those strengths real? The shooting seems to be very real. He Nike Elite Youth Basketball League led in points scored and top 5 in 3-pointers made. That's with all of the big prospects, so you know that the jump shot is there. It looks really fluid, and while I said he can be streaky, when the hot streaks come, it's actually very scary. And then athleticism is some of the best in the entire draft. And so the defense is there because the athleticism is there. He has pretty good handles. He has good jump shooting. This is a guy that ceiling is just, there is none. It is insanely high. If you want to go pure upside with a pretty low floor and take a risk, this is a guy that I would take a chance on. 6'6", just turned 19 years old. Obviously should be healthy, didn't play. Another Canadian. I mean, this Canadian national team is going to be, like, insane, right? Because you got R.J. Barrett. You got Wiggins. You're going to have Sharpe. Current roster, Anthony Bennett. He's still playing, huh? This is not... Here we go. Wiggins, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jamal Murray, Chris Boucher, Brandon Clark, Kelly Olynyk, Dylan Brooks. I mean, damn. They're getting good. Lou Dort? O'Shea Brissett had a good moment. Anyway, we can't get off track here. So for Sharpe, again, I don't want to go too far, but I think there's varied ways to see how he projects as a player. I have a Bradley Beal type, probably more athletic than Bradley Beal, but similar play style, can kind of do it all and be your go-to guy. I also put down Vince Carter. That's a really high claim considering all the dunking prowess, but projects to have all the skills that Carter had in the bag. Will it translate? I don't necessarily know, but it looks that way to me. I saw some Brandon Roy, like healthy Brandon Roy, when he was dunking on people and shooting threes and being a fully capable defender when we thought Brandon Roy was going to be like MVP of the league, and then his knees shot out. And then I put a this isn't disrespectful to this player. I actually kind of like him, but it never really worked out in the perfect role. But Terrence Ross kind of has some of that ability. So if it doesn't go perfect, you can see him still filling that role. And sometimes Terrence Ross has like 40 in a night, and you're like, how is this happening? And with like 4 highlight dunks and then 6 threes. And you're like, why isn't... And he's a good defender too. I never really understood why he hasn't found the perfect role. Sometimes that happens. But just oozing with talent. If you want to take Sharpe, I would not blame you starting at the 4th pick. If the Kings took him, I wouldn't blame him. There's going to be someone that thinks this guy is going to be the best player in the draft with the highest upside. And the person that lands him is going to have to feel that way and develop him that way immediately and see what they have when he steps in the building. But all the skills are there. His bag is deep. Next, AJ Griffin, another really hard one to evaluate. The first two are similar in that they can fill roles and also have upside. These next two have all the upside but concerns. With Sharpe, it's just experience and not having seen him against real competition. With Griffin, it's injury. A bunch of injuries, lower legs. It's not great. It's not what you want, and the medicals are going to really decide where this guy goes. Now, sometimes that works out perfectly. Sometimes you get a steal, and sometimes you'll overpay for a guy that's going to tear up the knee sooner rather than later or have a shorter career. I'm concerned about that with Griffin. He's young, actually only 18, about to turn 19 while I'm recording this. And the skills for him are there too. He's a weird player to watch. Again, same thing I just said about Mark Williams in the intro. This Duke team was so hard to evaluate because it was Paolo so much, but they had 5 or 6 guys that can really probably be the star of a real college team, and yet didn't necessarily have the bandwidth to do it all the time. I would like to look at Griffin's game logs because, yeah, you see certain games where it's like 27 here. And the threes, I mean, 5 for 5 here, 3 for 6, 4 for 5, 3 for 5, 3 for 7, 6 for 10. Can definitely shoot it. 4 for 6. You have the 1 for 8s. I mean, everyone goes cold eventually. Didn't do it against UNC. Was kind of non-existent, which is a little scary. But again, a lot of mouths to feed on that Duke team, and Paolo was doing a lot. Looked good in the tournament before that. The shooting ability is pretty tantalizing with Griffin. 45% from 3. But again, the stroke looks good. I think he's going to be a good shooter. And 6'6", 220 pounds, can really fill out, can be a legit 2-guard. Exactly what you want from a 2-guard. He projects pretty similarly to Jimmy Butler when you're watching him. I know that's a popular player comparison that everyone is kind of throwing out there, and it's not exactly perfect because the defense isn't the same. So more 3 and less D, but Jimmy Butler style, because when you watch him even move around and handle the ball and the way that he attacks, it looks a lot like you're watching a young Butler. So turn on the tape and see if you see what I mean. I could also see Jaylen Brown in the same way. Less D, more 3. And the only other player I came up with that isn't quite as sexy, but I think is more accurate to how he plays, is Gary Trent Jr. Also came from Duke. Also was on a loaded Duke team that didn't get as many shots as you think that player deserved. And now in the NBA, immediately kind of showed like, hey, by the way, I can stroke threes and I'm pretty solid on defense, and I can serve a role as your 2 guard whenever you need me to. He hasn't even cracked into how high I think his ceiling can go, and I think Griffin will end up being the same. It might be a little bit of a slow burn, but there are going to be moments where you're like, this guy hit 8 threes in the game? How did that happen? So yeah, shooting, offense in general, handles, and effort are all pros. I think the defensive thing is weird because sometimes the actual defensive output wasn't there, which stops me from calling him a Jimmy Butler, but there's something in the way that his body is constructed and his strength and his intensity and effort that is good that makes me think he won't be a turnstile at the NBA level. I don't know if he'll be a lockdown defender, but I think there's upside to unlock that if he can really convert that effort into skill. And then the weaknesses, like I said, injuries are just a real concern. I don't know how to evaluate that, but they have to be factored in. And then actual defensive output, like I said, steals and blocks were very, very low for a guy that should be a better defender. And range on the 3, I'm a little concerned about it. I do wonder how that goes as he gets to the next level. Kind of like a Butler. Like when he's shooting from the college 3-point line in an NBA game, you think it's going to go in. And then when he's shooting at the NBA range, you're like, okay, maybe. So we'll see. I mean, that remains to be seen. It's not a huge concern, but if I had to list it as some kind of weakness. And then lead guard skills, I'm just not going to anticipate from Griffin. He is a 2 guard, but he's not the combo guard that you're looking for that so many players and teams have and want. He's not going to be your lead guard. This is not going to be your pick and roll guy. This is going to be your spot up shooter that can fill it up and give you points and space the floor for you and do a lot of versatile things. But on the ball, creating offense and playmaking, I don't know if this is your guy. So I like Griffin. I don't know if I would be the one to draft him. And if I miss out on a 45% 3-point shooter that can play 2 for me and allow my point guard to kind of be more creative, so be it. If the doctors told me that his legs are fine and the injuries aren't a concern, that you could see him fly up draft boards. It's just really, really going to depend on that. And, I mentioned Brandon Roy for Shaedon Sharpe. You would hate to be the one drafting Brandon Roy now and have all the hype and build your whole team around him, and then that goes away and your whole thing is screwed. So it's nothing against him as a prospect. It's just fear of the unknown, I suppose. The last one on my list, Osumane Dieng from New Zealand. I'm not terribly high on this guy. I think weaknesses are glaring. Shooting. He can't shoot. Just cannot shoot. I don't know if that's going to get turned around. The free throw percentage under 70. For a guy that's 6'7", but listed as a center, it's all very weird. This says 6'7". Some people listing him as 6'10". So that's weird. Yeah, 6'10 here. Let's just check one more. 6'9". So I don't know what to make of the height. I think he's bigger than 6'7" for sure. You want to call him a center, all right, but he's a weird prospect and has to fit into your team mold really well because the weaknesses are shooting and maybe defense. I don't know what to make of the defense because he's kind of a perimeter player and yet a center and really big and long, but not a rim protector at all, not even a little bit, and is going to get bullied on the inside if you have him defending centers, but then can also be a switch guy onto a guard that can survive maybe, so that's good. I don't know where the defense projects, but there are strengths. Handle. He can really handle the basketball for a big, long guy that I think can create matchup problems, and he can play in the pick and roll as the primary ball handler, and he can create space for sure, and is decent passer, although not many assists coming from it. So is that the guy you want on your pick and roll? Maybe not. Can attack the rim, I guess, with the handle, but is he going to be a high athleticism finisher? No. And awareness, from what I've watched, now he's playing as a young guy in a professional league, we've seen this New Zealand league turn out different kind of players. It's the same thing I said about LaMelo Ball. It's like, yeah, he looks good, but who is he playing against? And then it turns out, like, well, playing against pros is probably better than playing against non-pros. So maybe there's some of that. But if I want a ball-handling center, I probably want him to be able to shoot or pass or defend. And I don't really think Dieng is going to do that. Some people are much higher on him than I am. I think the biggest upside comparison-wise would be like a Nick Batum kind of guy, although he's a better shooter than Dieng for sure. Maybe like a Kyle Anderson, who has always been a weird player. He's like, you watch him and you're like, well, he's fluid. He's got skills, but where do I put him in my offense and what do I do? Kind of like a facilitating point forward, like an offensive Bam Adebayo, but without any jumper or finishing ability or the defense that Bam brings to the table, which is really why you want him on the court in general. So I don't know what to make of Dieng at all. And so he's not really on my board much. I'm sure someone will reach. I'll be shocked if he flies up boards. I think he's last on this list for a reason. And some of my honorable mentions I might even put above him. But just not my style player. It's too many question marks for me. A guy that can't shoot or pass and maybe can't defend and isn't a great athlete. I get that there's some skill for a guy. He's a unicorn, right? But everyone says that now, even though there's a million of them. That can handle the ball at that size, but I don't know what else is going to come of it. So that's kind of where I sit with him. And then a few honorable mentions before we get out. I do kind of think there's some intriguing players that could fall towards the end as far as wings go, and maybe some of these fall into the second round. I don't know. E.J. Liddell, Ohio State, weird player because he's not that tall. He's like barely 6'6", but can defend the paint and played some center for Ohio State here and there, even against like Kofi Cockburn in the Illinois games, that was an insane game. Go back to that. So like I guess a super small ball 4 like Wiggins is doing in the NBA Finals, but do you want your 6'6" player to defend centers? That's not going to work in the NBA, obviously, but can get tough with bigger wings. So I guess that's good. And can shoot the ball for sure. So I think he'll play a role. Jalen Williams from Santa Clara, I just like because he can stroke jump shots and shows effort. I think this is a person that towards the end of the draft, you put him on a good team that really needs space the floor shooting. Like if the Bucks could get their hands on Jalen Williams, I don't know if he'll fall that far or what their pick situation is like. They probably don't have any. But if they could trade up and go get one, and that's just one example. There's a ton of teams that needs floor spacing shooters, right? Challenges with athleticism, but I think is going to shoot so well, over like 45% from 3 in college. And the shot just looks really good. So I'm intrigued by that. Even if he turns out to be a Kyle Korver, that's a really good role. And then Tari Eason from LSU, not the kind of guys I love to draft. Reminds me of the classic athletic tweeners that can't stretch the floor enough, like at best a Jeremy Grant. But the truth is, the way the NBA is trending, there's more room for those guys than ever before, probably. So wouldn't be super high on my list, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Maybe there were some we left out. We talked about the bigs in the open, how we didn't love a ton of them, but there were some that were worth mentioning. I think that's a wrap on. We could go way further down the rabbit hole. There are some second round people I like. Maybe you'll see that when the bets come out and we do some picks finally for this. But if you want picks for the finals, moving on through the finals, we got a lot on the Warriors. Let's hope they pan out and finish this thing off. And if you're watching it after they already did, then, great. But a lot of second round people I always like and fall in love with. I remember Lou Dort was one of the guys I was like, this guy didn't get drafted. And then I felt so good when he finally filled out a role and is turning to be like maybe a starting level player in the NBA. So there'll be more of that. I don't know if we'll do another video for it or if we'll just post at MikeTheMush Sports on the Twitter and Instagram. Give those a follow. There's always picks and analysis going through there when we don't have the videos up. We will continue to do videos at least once a week. There's more stuff coming. I'm excited for the draft. It's one of my favorite moments. So hopefully now you have a better, well-rounded view of all these players. If you didn't watch the other videos, go back to them. Like and subscribe. Leave a comment on how you're feeling about these players, whether you agree or disagree. It helps the algorithm. It helps the channel. I appreciate you watching. We'll see you next time. Peace out.